Hi, my name is Justin Cross, and I'll be your host today. So welcome to the Sponsor and Vendor Virtual Exhibition. First off, I just want to say thank you to all sponsors and vendors that we have this year. Thank you goes out to all of our speakers, to our planning committee, and to all of you safety professionals and students in attendance this year. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. We're going to hear from 4 different sponsors and vendors. If you do have any questions throughout, if you could place them in the chat, and after we hear from all 4 sponsors and vendors, we will circle back and answer your questions. So with that, we'll jump right in. Special thanks to our platinum sponsor, Jessica Richardson, from the Board of Certified Safety Professionals. So Jessica is Senior Manager of Partnerships, and she's also a fellow chapter member. So thank you, Jessica, for your continued support and platinum sponsorship. And with that, I'll turn it over to you to share the latest from BCSP.
Recording.
Hi, everyone. The Board of Certified Safety Professionals is proud to sponsor Western Pennsylvania's ASSP chapter. As a member myself, I'm really appreciative of these events and really appreciate all the hard work that goes into getting the speakers, developing the schedule, working with the exhibitors and booths. So round of applause for the crew that put this PDC together. And I can't wait until we're back together in person again. So from the BCSP front, we've been very busy, and I'd like to share a little update with you. The first thing is you'll notice on my screen, I'm sharing bcspgls.com. This is the Global Learning Summit, which is our latest endeavor. And we know that it's been really hard to get together physically, as you're all feeling right now. So our big give back this year and push towards the global safety world is putting together this virtual event, which is going to be held May 10th to 12th, about a month. We're going to be learning, networking, and connecting from anywhere in the world. So right now we have several thousand attendees representing 46 countries. Hopefully it's 47 by the time you hear this. And we also have, those attendees are on 6 continents. So if anyone knows anyone from Antarctica who's interested in learning more about safety, let's hook them up. Got to be a research center there somewhere. And additionally, we have speakers from 11 different countries. So this is truly a global event, and I'm really excited to show you what it's all about. You'll notice the price there is $25, and that's about 160 hours of content, so 16 CEUs. We know how hard it is going to get CEUs at an affordable price. So this is our real big push for recertification, and I'm up this year, so I'll definitely be attending. There's videos on the website. You can learn more. You can become a sponsor. Like I said, if your organization's interested in that global exposure, this is a great event, and it's for a good cause with an awesome mission. We also have sponsors and affiliates that are pretty familiar to most of you. And ASSP is one of our affiliates, and they understand the importance of bringing professional development and partnering with other associations. So we're super proud to have ASSP as one of our affiliates. So the first thing I want to tell you about is the learning agenda. It's pretty intense. So you can see here we have professional and career tracks. So the professional and career tracks, we have leadership development, career development, organizational performance, exposure science, and industrial hygiene, the future of safety and innovation, and HR, security, and environmental management. Industry tracks, we have BPP and management systems, a global approach to managing risk and insurance. We have construction, we have energy, powering our world safely, and advancing supply chain, manufacturing, and logistics safety. So I just want to show you all the learning agenda, and this is all for the price of $25, which is insane. And we got some pushback, but everyone understands why it's affordable, because it's so important to get this information to safety professionals, but also project managers, HR professionals, people who have a peripheral interest in safety or responsibilities in safety who maybe can't invest hundreds of dollars in some PD. So you can see here, it's going to go 7. There's a lot of presentations. You're going, how can I view all this in 3 days? Well, all of this will be available on the Socio platform for attendees for 30 days after the close of the event. So you'll essentially have 32 days to, get your CEUs, learn what you want to learn. And you can see here that there's, a lot going on. We have different speakers, different learning tracks, and you can sort in any way you want to. So I'm going to go back to this page. And I want to show you some FAQs. So this is the basics. We do have group registration. So if you have a bunch of safety pros or supervisors or some team from your organization who's interested in learning about the GLS and getting on board with it, we do offer group registrations. Right here on the FAQ, we have the GLS group registration and interest form. And the reality of how cool this event is, I think this is our first one, and it's coming along spectacularly. As you can see, the content's going to be amazing. The price is really great. But most importantly, there's also going to be obviously exhibitor booths, but rooms wherein we'll have discussions that are moderated and be talking about things like best practices for several different hazards or industries, and also things like behavior-based safety versus HOP. So you can get as advanced, as intermediate, or beginner level as you want, and there's going to be a world of safety professionals at your fingertips. The next update from BCSP, I'm taking you all over to our website, bcsp.org, the main one. This has just been updated. So it might not be familiar for you guys. It went live in January, so this is new for us. We tried to make it a little bit easier to navigate and look towards. You can see these certification sponsors. So I'm going to click on this because I think it's important to talk about. We just expanded this program. For those of you that don't know, we have the group account management and certification sponsors. And if you ever need to connect with me on LinkedIn or Colin Brown, our information's here. So we have certification sponsors, and for the history of this program, 20 plus years, it's been for STS and STSC holders, because it's about how companies get their supervisors on board, leaders at every level aligned and speaking the same safety language. So you can see we have different levels: Diamond, Emerald, Ruby, and Sapphire. Well, recently, we've expanded this program to include all credentials. So if your company has basically, 6 CSPs, 7 OHSTs, several different SMSs and CITs, we decided that in expanding organizational credentialing and really helping companies, that we would recognize them this way. So if you already work for an organization that is a group account management sponsorship for credentials, understand that that's going to be expanding. These numbers are going to be exploding, and we're really looking forward to growing that program. As always, recertification's coming up, in the summertime now, so be aware of that. I showed you how to get points with GLS. And as always, if you have any certification questions, inquiries, I'm local and I pick up the phone. I can come see you. We can do a Zoom, whatever information you need. I'd be happy to do a presentation on sponsorships for your organization, talk about how to get more people certified in your entire company, or just general direction. So if there's any questions, please feel comfortable getting a hold of me. BCSP is so proud to sponsor this event year after year, and we'll continue to do that. Thanks everyone, and have a wonderful conference.
Great information, and thank you, Jessica. So next up, we have our partnership sponsor from Dr. John Mulroy, representing the PA OSHA consultation team at IUP. So thank you, Dr. Mulroy. Let's hear from the PA OSHA consultation team.
Since 1983, the PA OSHA consultation at Indiana University of Pennsylvania has been local businesses towards safer workplace practices across the Commonwealth. Our consultants bring decades of experience combined with support from the world-renowned safety science program at IUP, ensuring that businesses receive only the best in modern solutions to current challenges. Whether it's identifying occupational hazards, creating strategies for OSHA compliance, or facilitating hands-on workshops and training, our consultants provide comprehensive services to businesses of all sizes at no cost, because safety matters.
The OSHA consultation program really allows our employees an opportunity to see an active and engaged safety program. And when we bring consultants on site, every time that happens, it's an opportunity for us to get better. It's an opportunity for somebody with a different skill set, with a different background than we may have, really to look at what we're doing and provide suggestions about how we could do things better. That really drives very positive morale for our teams.
In our rapidly changing world, it's essential to recognize what workplace safety means with each new day. It's common for employers to associate OSHA enforcement with costly citations and penalties that hinder business. But this is where the PA OSHA consultation is different from enforcement. Not only does an open consultation visit exempt businesses from programmed OSHA inspections, it also encourages an ongoing partnership that promotes accountability, situation-specific problem solving, and significant reductions in worker injuries and illnesses.
The IUP consultants have been with us since day one, and they've watched us evolve into something pretty spectacular. And they're the nicest folks. All they want to do is help you. We took them into every single corner of our laboratory, and they gave their opinions, which only made us stronger and a better company. It's a game changer.
To have this program in your back pocket and as part of your arsenal to protect your employees. Doesn't matter if you're a retail store or if you're a factory, you have the means necessary to protect your employee.
A robust safety and health management program takes time, diligence, and hard work, but the value to both employees and employers can't be overstated. Each year, our consultants help employers save hundreds of thousands of dollars in potential OSHA citations. Additionally, the Safety Health Achievement Recognition Program, or SHARP, helps businesses establish stronger, more profitable relationships with clients based on proven competence and trust. But in the end, the greatest reward is something that no one can put a price on. Employees who can walk into the workplace and be confident in their safety and health. That's why the PA OSHA consultation is committed to streamline online accessibility and dedicated staff so that no matter what the future holds, the men and women that work across Pennsylvania can go home safely at the end of each day.
Thanks again, PA OSHA consultation team. So next up, we have our gold sponsor, John Kowalski from Safety Performance. So thank you, John. I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, my name is John Kowalski, president of UA. I've worked in safety and UA performance for most of my career. 10 years in nuclear safety, 20 years in industrial safety, and another 15 years in UN performance at various sites around the United States. To help with this presentation today, we have an expert in the field of UN performance, Mr. John Summers. John's a Vietnam vet. He worked at over 230 power plants from around the world. I hope you enjoy this presentation. We want to help you get to the next level of safety. So what is safety? If you look at this picture, what do you see? What behaviors do you see? You see any violations, standards? I believe there's a fall protection standard. Several people are probably at risk for falls. See some forklift violations? Who's in charge of this? Who's the guy in the front hiding behind the boxes? The safety professional with his fingers crossed? They were actually rewarded for being very innovative, for getting the job done. Sometimes people are recognized and rewarded for getting results, taking shortcuts to get the job done. So the last slide, we talked about getting results with the wrong behaviors. Safety performance is not about just getting results. doesn't equal results. Safety performance is about using the right behaviors consistently to get the right results. Being a retired volunteer fireman, I will submit to you that we always encourage getting the right results with the right behaviors, because you never know when the worst can happen.
So we have talked about a systematic approach to improving performance. And what you see here is a simple model that John Kowalski developed that we can use to explain to you how you can improve your performance. And we want to start with the organizational values, because that's the foundation that the rest of this model is going to work with. Now, what does that do? Well, that heavily influences the leader's behaviors. Well, when we look at the leader's behaviors, they're going to influence whether people make errors, maybe not adhering to the rules, hazards, violations, and risks that they're willing to take. Now, that influences how we want to establish our programs, processes, our procedures, and our training. All of this comes together in influencing each and every individual's behavior. And finally, if all those things are working properly in concert, we're going to see improving safety performance. So this is a continuous circle of performance improvement if you're doing the right things. So safety performance in action. Safety is not the lack of injuries. We've made 3 million man hours of hand-out coats. No, safety is the use of the performance tools John discussed earlier, led the discussion on, and having at least one solid defense in place when we perform our work. If you look back in time, John and I put together a paper that was published in November of 2019, and it tells about this systematic approach. And a lot of what you've heard today was grounded in this article that we put together. John and I would like to thank you for sitting and listening to us talk today. And you are successful only when others are successful, if you're a good leader. So on that note, we've given you our email addresses. If you have questions, something to follow up on, something we can hand with, something we can clarify, we'd appreciate you using them. Again, thank you for your time and attention today.
Great information. Thank you both. And thanks again for your sponsorship. So next up, we have Kevin Miller from Eaton Corporation. Thank you to Kevin and team at Eaton Corporation for your gold sponsorship. So with that, let's turn it over to you.
The Electrical Worker Training Program at Eaton is excited to participate in the Western PA ASSP Conference. The tenets of our training program are to support companies and individuals to become qualified, certified, and safe electrical workers. We'd like to take the next couple of minutes to show our training facilities, mobile trailers, and other methods we can deliver to support your electrical training needs. Hi, my name is Kevin Miller. I'm one of the trainers with Eaton Corporation. I'd like to walk you through some of the offerings we have to show you what we can provide for your company. To start, we want to talk about some of our experience in the past. We have 2 decades of training experience, and we have trained over 100,000 people. As of right now, we have 15 trainers available. We have 2 primary Eaton facilities. These include industrial labs, power quality labs, microgrid systems, and utility protection and control labs. We also have 3 mobile trailers with power distribution equipment to do training on site at any location. We have 2 training centers strategically located. These have expansive facilities for industrial, commercial, utility, and data center applications. The available locations include Houston, Texas, as well as Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This helps us offer a more local solution for all of your training needs. When it comes to in-person training, this is some of the best-in-class training. This is experience-based learning that helps promote a deeper level of understanding. In-person participants learn industry best practices and the latest innovations through hands-on training in multiple application environments. This coursework is identical to the internal training Eaton provides to its 1,500 plus field service professionals. We also have world-class Eaton Experience Centers that have been designed around the training curriculum. With our expansive offering of in-person courses and our experienced training staff, We can cater programs directly to your training needs. We also have 3 trailers that we can do on-site training. The nice part about these trailers is it's real equipment, so your people get that hands-on experience without the risk of taking down the facility or working on energized equipment. We can also provide in-person remote instruction. Some of these are open enrollment that are scheduled, and you can purchase these directly online. We can also provide on-demand training for 10+ employees for whatever topics are required. Another popular offering is e-learning. These are available on your schedule. We have an extensive library of mixed media training modules across 5 major categories. We have electrical theory, electrical safety, maintenance and testing, equipment focused, as well as PowerPoint. We can create custom learning paths and manage training compliance. These are self-paced courses with a 90-day access window, and also resumes at the same position upon re-entry. This allows workers to work around their schedule of when they have open time to get their training requirements done. We also have a repository for previously filmed customer-specific in-person training events. This is a great way to round out your curriculum when it comes to content. This will offer a lot of that context to the content and the questions that are asked during a live class to help round out their understanding and what those kind of frequently asked questions may be. Join us on LinkedIn to see what we're doing and where we're at. Let us know how we can help you in your training requirements to keep your employees safe and qualified for the work they're doing. For more information, you can find us on the web at www.eaton.com/EWT. Feel free to reach out and let us know how we can help you with your training requirements. Thank you for your time and be safe. Again, my name is Kevin Miller.
Kevin and the Eaton Corporation team, thank you for your sponsorship, and thanks again to all of our sponsors. Apologies there. So we are back live. We had pre-recorded that to hopefully avoid any type of technical issues. So we are back live, and I am checking to see if we have any questions from the chat, which I don't believe so. Let me check in on that. I'm not seeing any questions for any of the sponsors or vendors. Please go ahead and put them in the chat. And as we pause for that, I am going to transition into our next session. We do have a special session today. So we have with us, we have Lauren Ulrich. Lauren is the Executive Director of Operations Management and Logistics at the American Red Cross. And Lauren has an impressive background, including service in the United States Marine Corps as a logistics officer. So thank you for your service, Lauren. She has degrees in international affairs and emergency management, and she has participated in a wide range of crisis operations, including Operations Enduring and Iraqi Freedom. She also has background and experience in international and domestic disaster response operations, including the Haiti earthquake, Hurricane Sandy, Michigan water crisis, Hurricane Harvey, and the California wildfires. So Lauren and her team are responsible for the readiness, planning, resourcing, and implementation of scalable response operations to meet the needs of disaster clients for large-scale Red Cross operations. So with that, I am going to welcome Lauren Ulrich and thank her and turn it over to you.
Excellent. And since I'm not a recorded session and liable to have technical difficulties, can you hear me okay, Justin? Do you have me all right?
Yes, I hear you fine now. Yes. Thank you.
Awesome. And lucky for me and for all of you, my kids just left the house. So hopefully we'll keep the house disruptions to a minimum. So good morning, everybody. And as Justin said, my name is Lauren Ulrich, and I'm currently serving as the Executive Director of Operations Management and Logistics for our National Disaster Response Team here at the American Red Cross. And so basically what that means is I have the privilege of leading the team of men and women that are responsible for ensuring that our large-scale disaster responses are executed successfully. So what we're going to talk about over the next few minutes is basically some mission and services of the American Red Cross, a focus on domestic disaster relief, an overview of the Red Cross logistics teams that I used to manage, and what the impacts of COVID-19 had on some of our logistics operations as it relates to responder mobilization and material sourcing. And then we'll end with some takeaways, how you can get involved with supporting Red Cross or, world according to law and kind of thing. So it should be a pretty quick session, and I'm happy to take any questions, Justin, at the end, should there be any. So the mission of the American Red Cross. The mission of the American Red Cross is to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. And we do that through the provision of 5 key lines of what we call lines of service: domestic disaster relief, international response, the provision of life-saving blood, service to our armed forces members and their families, and also through the provision of training and certifications in health and safety. So that's really our organization's portfolio. And what I've been focused on for my 12 years with the American Red Cross has really been domestic disaster response with some stints overseas in some of the international response arenas. So from a domestic disaster response perspective, just to give you a sense of the type of volume that we experience in the United States, every 8 minutes, the American Red Cross responds to an emergency. And what that equals is about 60,000 emergencies or disasters within the United States every year. The vast majority of those are home fires. So think single family house fire or a multifamily house fire, so an apartment building where people either have significant damage or lose their homes. 100 or so of that 60,000 are what we call internally national level events. And so these are larger relief operations that necessitate the mobilization of additional responders or workers or materials that are not resident within that impacted community. And we respond to about 100 or so of those a year, and that's really my team's focus. And those events, just for context, range from anywhere, like the cost of those events or the cost to execute those events, cost the organization anywhere between $50,000 upwards of 20+ million. We stopped counting after 20 million. So that's really my team's focus, is those large scale events. So recent events would be Kentucky tornadoes, flooding, wildfires in California, Sandy, Harvey. Those types of events are where my team's area of focus are. And what we do from a domestic disaster response perspective is we also serve to prevent and alleviate human suffering. And how we do that is we focus on alleviating human suffering by meeting the immediate disaster caused needs of individuals that are impacted, households, and communities. And we do this in collaboration with a pretty large portfolio of partners. The services that we provide in domestic disaster response start off with emergency sheltering. And emergency sheltering for us is really our flagship service, because that's, if you're in need of emergency shelter, you're pretty much at your most vulnerable. You can't stay in your house. So think context of you've got tornado damage, or there's a hurricane coming and you need to evacuate. What the American Red Cross does is that we open what we call emergency shelters. And that's a fancy name for converting a common room in a church or a high school gymnasium, or in the instances of the last 2 years, hotel spaces. And we bring people in out of the storm or give people a place to stay if their houses have suffered significant damage. And in some instances, that's a night. And in others, it can be weeks and months. And we have teams of responders around the country that's their specialty, is to do the emergency sheltering. That's also the keystone that we use to build around all of our other services. So other services that we do in domestic disaster response include things like feeding. So if you're staying in our shelter, we're going to give you hot meals every day, multiple times a day type thing. If you've got damage in your community and you're out cleaning out your house, but you don't have power or water, we're going to run meals out to you in that area as well. We also do a distribution of emergency supplies, which generally focuses in the cleaning supply, like the cleaning area space. So you've got to muck out your house because you've had a flood, supplies to do that. Or in recent instances, it can be very specific. So if people have lost clothing, eyeglasses, medication, we also work with getting those things replaced as well. And then the fourth service that we use to prevent and alleviate human suffering in emergencies for domestic disaster response is really individual assistance, or what we call individual assistance. And what that looks like is that's the provision of cash and referrals or casework so that people that have significant damage that aren't going to be going home anytime soon can access larger resource pools and additional organizations that provide some wraparound services. So to give you a sense of scale, from when the president declared COVID-19 as a national emergency in February 2020 to February 2022, we opened over 127,000 individual cases for people who had major damage to their houses. And we issued, as a part of that casework, over $77 million in relief funds to those households. We responded to over 128,000 disaster action team calls. So think of that as your smaller level events, like the house next door to you burns down, or the apartment complex on your street suffers a fire as well. So 128,000 of those. We assessed over 168,000 homes and found about 55,000 of those major damaged or destroyed. So 58,000 households in this country over the last 2 years were displaced either permanently or for a significant amount of time because their house needed to be repaired or rebuilt. We conducted over 1.6 million shelter overnight stays. And all of that work in the last 2 years, despite being in the midst of a global pandemic, was done in person. So how did we do that? And how do we do that safely? The team that supports, from a resource mobilization perspective, the execution of all of those operations is the NHQ Disaster Logistics team. And disaster logistics is basically the effective flow of goods and services, in our case, Red Cross personnel, vehicles, services, materials, from the point of where they originate, either in a state of readiness like a warehouse or wherever their home of record is, to the point of need. So that's logistics. The end-to-end flow of goods, services, stuff, people, vehicles, anything that you need from where it was to where it needs to be. And there's a team at National Headquarters for the Red Cross that takes care of that. And the way that they're organized is they're basically split into two sections. One section, which is comprised of 9 people, is responsible for the mobilization, the end-to-end mobilization, so not just there, but also back, of our responder workforce, of which 95% of the people that you see responding in disaster response for the Red Cross are volunteers. So the mobilization of that workforce is done by a 9-person team at National Headquarters. And on average, they move about 27,000 responders around the country every year. The material and service support team, or what I affectionately call the everything else team, takes care of everything else. And this is actually a very small team. It's a 3-person team currently. And they are accountable for moving material from our warehouses, for mobilizing our emergency response vehicle fleet, for accessing equipment like forklift, generators, hand washing stations, porta potties, things that you need to basically build an infrastructure in a damaged community or in a place that it didn't exist before. And in addition to mobilizing things like food product, water, snacks, all of that sits with that small material and service support team. And just for a sense of their scale, on average, they move about $12 million worth of material and services every year, equating to about 400 truckloads of supply. And like all good things, those two small things in our organization are bolstered by very large groups of volunteers that work with them, in some instances, 40+ hours a week, just like they do, or in other instances, they come onto those teams as surge support. So we have the ability to scale our own structure internally should we need to when we start getting into things like the peak of our season, which is right around the corner. So our logistics model is based off of two supporting concepts, and they're relevant here because it'll help you understand how we had to change those in order to operate safely in the pandemic. So the first concept that we rely on to mobilize our workforce and the material is speed to market. And what this simply is this is how quickly can you go from being ready to do something to actually doing it or meeting that need. So we have 50 regions around the country, and those 50 regions are responsible for being able to open an emergency shelter within 2 hours of notification. So if something happens in your communities today, within 2 hours, the American Red Cross is able to open and operate an emergency shelter. They're also responsible for what we call initiating the larger level events. So let's say that thing that happens in your community isn't a house fire or a multifamily fire. It is a hurricane or a tornado or a flood. That same local team that was opening that emergency shelter for the house fire is opening those emergency shelters for that larger event. But what we're also doing simultaneously is basically turning on the national resource pool. So mobilizing all of the responders that are not impacted and all of the material services to come in and get us what our second concept brings us, which is speed to scale, which is how can you meet those needs at volume. So you go from meeting maybe operating one 20-person shelter to operating 20 100-person shelters. So those two concepts of speed to market, speed to scale, those are the things that we had to adapt when we were met with the challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so before we get into how we had to adjust our logistics processes, I noticed when looking at the schedule that Justin sent over that Camille Oakes is giving an afternoon session. And I thought the title of her session so apt for this conversation. Title of her session is Business Skills for Safety Pros, Understand the Business First. What struck me in preparing for this was if we hadn't applied what we knew to be true about our business model and known what it was that we were looking to protect or to make safer, right, or to mitigate risk around, we would have been unsuccessful in doing so at the beginning and for the duration of the pandemic. So if you walk away with nothing else, then for me, if your mission is to make safe work environments, you cannot create a safe work environment unless you understand the work. And so January 2020, my boss gave me a call and he said, Lauren, there's this thing called COVID-19. I think it's coming to the United States and it's going to have a significant impact on our mission and how we operate. And fundamentally, we still have to provide this service for the American people. And we knew pretty immediately, or we understood pretty immediately, that you can't open a high school gym from a computer in Washington, D.C., right? You need to be there. You need to have the keys in your hand. You need to be setting up cots, welcoming people in, handing them snacks, water, food. So we knew, and we made the decision in January that our mission and that our operations in support of that mission would continue to go on and would continue to go on in person. So then it becomes, how do you take what was a relatively safe environment and how do you operate that same way or operate that same mission in an unsafe environment, right? In a global pandemic. So we did basically three things. We looked at what material requirements would be needed in order to protect our workforce and our clients. In order to do that, in partnership with a woman that used to be on my team, actually, who's a public health safety expert, we went brass tacks, right? So what type of equipment, what type of PPE do our responders need in a shelter? Well, the person at the front, for example, has the highest likelihood of coming into interaction with someone who has an unknown COVID status. And then the nurse has the second highest likelihood, since they're going to do bedside, essentially, service. So how many patients does a nurse see in an hour? How many gloves does a nurse use per patient? How many masks can we expect the nurse to go through over the course of her shift, right? His or her shift. And so it basically walking through every single permutation of job in a shelter, client in a shelter, and then creating a whole suite of planning assumptions around what products are needed and what the consumption rates are going to be, what surge support looks like, right? Because in disaster response, you always need the ability to welcome in a few more people type thing. What happens, what type of wear and tear would we expect to see on this equipment over the course of a shift? They're not going to have the ability to clean or anything. So something that might be non-consumable would be consumable in this type of austere environment. And at the end of that work, we had lists of products, specifications, consumption rates by position, which rolled up to, this is about $6 million worth of PPE, for example, that the organization needs just to be able to do the mission we did last year without in a global pandemic. So began the acquisition process for that. And as a result, the Red Cross hasn't had some of the PPE challenges that other organizations have, because that was the very first thing that we did, was how do we create a safe environment for our workforce if we're going to continue to ask them to provide this service in person. The second thing we did, and this was somewhat a function of my Marine background, for those of you who are also veterans, I called the gentleman that works for me who's responsible for our responder mobilization. And though we always had responder health and safety as a part of the plan, we actually deploy people to an operation who are responsible for that. They weren't equipped or designed, right, for a global pandemic. So I got Charlie on the phone and we had a very quick conversation. And I said, Charlie, if we're going to tell people that, if we're going to ask people to continue to deploy in this environment that's now inherently much more risky than it used to be, what do we as an organization need to do to make sure that there is an end-to-end process for responder care? So how do you ensure someone is going into as safe of an environment as possible? How do you make sure that they are equipped with triggers or anything like that so that they know if they're exposed, for example, that there's recourses or resources available to them? And how do we manage every single individual through that process? And so we stood up a COVID care team whose job was to do just that. I called it a CASEVAC plan from my background, but basically we knew with certainty that if we were putting people into this situation, that we had the infrastructure and the resources necessary to make sure that they are coming through on the other side or taken care of throughout the duration of that. And just for example, on average in 2020, 2021, we just had under 1% of our total in-person deployed responders report to us that they tested positive. And for those that did, or those that thought that they were exposed, they went through then a robust cycle of things like isolation, quarantine. And it wasn't just until we didn't wipe our hands of them when they landed at their home of record airport. If they had a potential exposure on that airplane, we were putting them up in a hotel on the backside so that they weren't walking that into their houses, right, into their families. And so we implemented that pretty immediately. And the third thing we did was we adopted a leadership culture of safety and awareness around the global pandemic. And it became a part of every conversation we had with operations, either in readiness or in execution. So quickly coined the phrase CDC, cover, distance, clean. And that was on the mouths of all of our operational leaders. We had COVID care officers deployed to relief operations with the express job of making sure that people were covering, distancing, and cleaning. We pushed those material resources that we had acquired to regions so that responders could deploy with them, to relief operations so that they were, as they were opening up the shelters and setting up cots, they had all of the masks and the hand sanitizers and the extra cleaning supplies that they needed in order to make it as safe of an environment as possible. And so that's really how we were able to operate effectively despite the global pandemic. And those provisions of safety that we extended to our responders, we also extended directly to our clients. So the idea that, if you walked into a Red Cross shelter, you didn't need to bring your own mask with you, you were going to get one, and you were going to get the same type of mask that we had for the responders that you were operating with. And though we never would kick anyone out if they refused to wear a mask, we had safety protocols in place that we could put those individuals in a separate space within that same building so that we could make sure that we were maintaining, a safe environment for them and a safe environment for the people that they were also sheltering with. So basically, in order to do that successfully, we had to understand what our business was, right? It's not enough to go out and say, I'm going to create a safe environment. I have to understand what the work is that's being done in that environment. What's the business? What's the workers? What are the work environments in which they are serving, right? A nurse working in isolation is going to have a different pattern of usage than a nurse that's just roaming a floor addressing any questions. And how do you, if you've got limited resources, how do you dedicate those to those key areas while giving everyone what they need to be successful as well? So if I could leave you with two things, the first would be, like any good Red Crosser, I'm going to make an appeal for volunteering or donating blood. So from a blood perspective, if you aren't aware, we are in a national crisis as a country. We have a critical shortage of blood. The American Red Cross is responsible for about 40% of the nation's blood supply. And just to give you some context, every 2 seconds, someone in this country needs blood. And a single car crash victim can need 100 units in recovery surgeries. And a single blood donation can save up to 4 lives. So if you're interested and able, the easiest thing to do is just Google Red Cross donate blood, and it'll come directly to a link where you pop in your zip code and it'll point you at the direction of your nearest blood drive. In addition to that, there's always room for a few more on our team. So if you're interested in volunteering with the Red Cross, either on our large scale relief operations for things like Harvey, tornadoes, Sandy, what have you, or interested in working locally, again, Google Red Cross volunteer and it'll pop you up and it'll get you linked in with your local chapter. And then I think from a safety perspective, your work is so critical, and the work that this team does is so critical. Especially in both my lines of business, the idea that you're operating in an unsafe environment anyway, and without the provision and without the focus of safety experts like you, accidents happen or things are more unsafe than they need to be. And that really distracts from your business, and in this instance, our mission. So I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity. This is a core group of professionals that I have the utmost respect for, and I think your mission is very critical. So Justin, with that, I'm happy to take questions if there are time, and if not, I'm also happy to say goodbye.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Great information. I am going to the chat here to see if we have any questions queued up. I don't see any. We'll give a moment if anyone has a question to add it there in the chat. But appreciate your time today. Just great information, and thank you so much for sharing. Okay, it looks like we do have a question with responders in Ukraine. How do you ensure their safety?
Sure. So the American Red Cross does not currently have any responders in Ukraine. But we are part of the International Federation of the Red Cross Red Crescent that does. And having been a member of our international deployment team, there is a robust safety process that you go through and in anticipation or in ramp up to your deployment, and also while you are there. So it is a balance between ensuring safety and accepting risk, right? And this was actually a very stark lesson for me because I transitioned from the Marine Corps to the Red Cross. And so I went from walking in a neighborhood with multiple weapons and the legal obligation to protect myself and my Marines to being a part of an organization that doesn't carry weapons, right? But what was shocking to me was the realization of how much wearing the Red Cross logo served to be my protection. Because the Red Cross is actually present in over 180 countries around the world and does such great humanitarian work that the uniform of the Red Cross itself can serve to be in some instances, in my experiences in Haiti, a calming effect on a crowd. And I was able to do as much, if not more, wearing the Red Cross vest as I was wearing a Marine uniform. But tactically for the responders that are in Ukraine, they're going to be supported by a cadre of safety officers, right, that brief them on the threats going into the country, brief them on the what I would call immediate actions should anything happen. And also there's a pretty substantial acceptance of personal risk when you walk into those situations. Just due to the nature of the work as well. But they have the Federation and the societies in which these individuals come from have very robust safety programs to make sure that they're mitigating risk to the extent possible. But outside of just risk mitigation, and some tactics around, standoff distance and those types of things, there's no offensive action that the Red Cross takes in these types of situations. And the American Red Cross actually, we've donated $12 million to the movement in support of the Ukraine. And in addition to that, we're deploying our technical experts to some European countries to support things like the cash program, which is the provision of cash to refugees coming into other parts of Europe, and to setting up call centers and what have you in those spaces, which is a different safety, Belgium or Poland is a different safety profile, obviously, than Ukraine.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Lauren, there is one additional question I see was sent in the chat. I believe it was privately to me. What is involved when a person wants to get involved with a local disaster response effort, such as hurricane or tornado response?
Sure. So the most effective way to get involved is to get involved in advance of the next one. So the way to do that is if you were to Google Red Cross volunteer, it'll come up to a link that says, how to volunteer with Red Cross, and it'll show you the array of options that are available to you. And those options are going to be in all of the lines of services we discussed. So you could support blood, you could support service of the armed forces, or, my team, the domestic disaster response team. And if you do that in advance of the storm or in advance of the next event, what that'll give you is it'll give you the opportunity to have conversations with the local teams, to have training, and actually getting in the door and on the team in advance sets you up for more opportunity. So the jobs that we have that are available to people that join the Red Cross as a volunteer are broad. There's about 50 plus different types of work you could do on a disaster response. So you could be a nurse, we have life safety and asset protection teams. We have warehouse workers. We have people that drive our feeding trucks. We have people that are working and supporting the most vulnerable in the shelters. And when you join us in advance, you get to choose what your path is, right? So you can say, I want to be a shelter worker, or I don't want to be on the front lines. I want to be in the warehouse, or I want to be in the office type thing. If you join us when the event is going on, it's much more finite of an experience. And it might be you come and work a shift, right? Or a couple hours, and you might work in a shelter, you might work in an office, you might drive a truck, those types of things. But if you want to chart your own path, I would recommend joining and reaching out in advance. If you just want to give a couple hours in time of the event, it's the same entree point, but you won't have the benefit of the experience, of the training or the experience or the conversations and the camaraderie that you would have built joining in advance of the event.
Thank you, Lauren. Thanks again. There's one additional question. So does the Red Cross have a training course for mental health issues related to disaster response?
Absolutely. So we have an internal focus and an external focus. So we actually have a cadre of mental health professionals, or disaster mental health volunteers, that we deploy to all of these operations around the country. And they work with our clients. So people impacted by the event themselves are getting the support from our disaster mental health volunteers in the shelters. They go out with our individual teams, to do fatality assistance, all of the above. We also actually have a cadre of spiritual care workers that do a similar but distinct mission. And we also turn that focus on ourselves. So when our responders mobilize, they have staff disaster mental health that's available to them. And we also have those resources available to them. If anyone has had any experience with that, it doesn't always manifest itself on day one, right? It could be something that manifests itself a couple of months after you get home, or a couple of years after you get home. And so those resources are available to both our clients and our responders. And we leverage, trained professional mental health providers to do that work.
Great, thank you. Thank you again. Well, I don't see any other questions queued up in the chat. So again, appreciate what you do, and thank you for the time today. Great information. So
thank you all.
Thanks, Lauren. Okay, everyone else, we are going to reconvene at 12:45. We'll be back. So thanks everyone. Get a little extra time for lunch today, and we'll be back prompt at 12:45.